When I found dog poop smeared on my car windshield for the third time this month, I knew my HOA board president had officially declared war. It's 6 a.m. in Phoenix. I'm standing in my own driveway in my boxers and bathrobe, steam rising from my coffee mug, mixing with the nauseating stench of revenge. This woman had been parking her white Lexus SUV in my driveway for 6 months, treating my property like her personal parking lot. But here's what she didn't know about me. 20 years as a civil engineer taught me that every structure has a weakness, including the power structure she thought protected her. So what would you do if your neighbor thought they owned your property? Would you call the police, the HOA, or would you get creative? And hey, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. I bet you've got HOA horror stories that would make my situation look like a picnic. Let me back up and tell you how this whole mess started. My name's Mike Chen. I'm 52, and 6 months ago, I bought a modest 3-bedroom house in Sunset Ridge, a Phoenix suburb that looked perfect on paper. The HOA fees were reasonable, it was close to my teenage daughter Emma, and after a brutal divorce, I just needed somewhere quiet to rebuild my life. The morning silence in the desert is something special. Just the whisper of sprinkler systems and the distant hum of early commuters heading to work. That peace lasted exactly 2 weeks. Sunset Ridge is one of those cookie-cutter developments built in 1998, 47 homes filled with middle-class families and retirees who mostly keep to themselves. The HOA board president is Patricia Moorcock, everyone calls her Patty, a 58-year-old real estate agent who's been running the show for 8 years. She moved into the corner lot in 2003 and apparently decided that gave her some kind of royal status. Here's the thing about Patty's house, she's got a circular driveway that could park 6 cars easily, but for some reason, she kept parking her white Lexus RX 350 in my driveway. The first time it happened, I figured it was an honest mistake. I walked over and knocked on her door. She answered wearing a tennis outfit that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. "Oh, I was just dropping off documents to the Hendersons next door," she said with this fake smile. "You don't mind, do you? It's just for community business." I should have said something right then. Should have told her to move her car and never park there again. But I'm a civil engineer, not a confrontation guy. I believe in systems, procedures, being reasonable. So I just smiled back and said, "Sure, no problem." Biggest mistake of my life. What started as just this once became twice a week, then every other day, then daily. Her excuses evolved like some kind of disease. HOA business, emergency, just 5 minutes. Every morning I'd walk out to leave for work and there it was, that white Lexus blocking my garage like some kind of territorial marker. You know that sound gravel makes when you're forced to walk around an obstacle in your own driveway? That crunching under your feet when you're carrying groceries an extra 100 yards because someone else decided your property belongs to them? That sound became the soundtrack to my growing frustration. My personality is methodical, patient. I fixed problems by understanding systems and finding fair solutions. Patty, on the other hand, was entitled, manipulative, and had figured out how to use her authority to justify whatever she wanted to do. The contrast couldn't have been starker. My neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, a sweet 74-year-old who'd lived here since the development opened, would watch from her window with this sad expression. The young couple next door, the Hendersons, started giving me these sympathetic looks but never said anything. Everyone could see what was happening, but nobody wanted to cross the HOA president. Then I started noticing the subtle comments. When Patty found out I was an engineer, she seemed genuinely surprised. "Oh, you're not in maintenance?" she asked, speaking slower and louder like I might not understand English. She'd make remarks about neighborhood character and certain types of residents that made my skin crawl. 3 weeks in, I was late to work for the 5th time because I couldn't get my car out of the garage. My teenage daughter Emma was embarrassed to have friends over because there was always this strange car in our driveway. The neighbors were watching this slow-motion violation of my property rights, and I felt powerless to stop it. But here's what Patty didn't understand about engineers. We're problem solvers, and every problem has a solution if you're willing to dig deep enough to find it. Week 3 brought the first official escalation. I came home from work to find a bright yellow HOA violation notice taped to my front door, the paper crackling in the desert wind as I unfolded it. Violation, unkempt yard appearance, holiday decorations out of season. The specific infractions? a small American flag in my garden labeled non-approved decoration, and a garden hose visible from the street. Total potential fines? $450, 0 cents. I stood there staring at that notice, feeling my blood pressure spike. This was 3 days after Memorial Day, and she was calling my American flag an unauthorized decoration. So I did what any good engineer would do. I gathered data. I walked the entire neighborhood with my phone, photographing identical violations on other properties. Garden hoses coiled next to driveways, American flags in front yards, decorative garden stakes, potted plants on porches. The Hendersons had the exact same flag in their yard. Mrs. Rodriguez had 2 garden hoses visible from the street. When I knocked on Mrs. Rodriguez's door to ask about it, she invited me in for coffee and confirmed my suspicions. "Mija," she said, her weathered hands wrapped around a ceramic mug, "she only writes tickets for people she doesn't like." My research revealed a pattern that made my stomach turn. Every homeowner who'd been ticketed was either a minority, a recent divorce, or someone who'd had a conflict with Patty. The violations she cited on my property existed on at least 15 other houses in the neighborhood, but somehow only certain people got notices. Here's a knowledge nugget that saved my bacon. In Arizona, your driveway is private property, even if it connects to a public street, which means unauthorized parking constitutes trespassing. Armed with this information, I started my counterattack. I began photographing Patty's car every time she parked in my driveway, using a timestamp app that recorded the exact date, time, and GPS coordinates. I created a spreadsheet because engineers love spreadsheets, documenting each incident, arrival time, departure time, weather conditions, and duration. In just 1 week, I had 14 documented violations. When Patty noticed me taking photos, she stormed over and confronted me. "Are you threatening me?" she demanded, her voice shrill enough to make the neighbor's dog start barking. "I'm calling the police." I calmly explained that I was documenting trespassing on my private property. Her face went through this fascinating color transformation, from pink to red to purple. Her response was swift and petty. She started parking even closer to my garage door, sometimes leaving just inches of clearance so I couldn't open it. She'd leave her car running with music playing, creating noise violations while violating my property rights. The woman had turned passive-aggressive behavior into an art form. But something interesting happened during this escalation. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared at my door one evening with a manila folder under her arm. "I've been documenting her behavior for years," she said. "You're not the first person she's targeted." The Henderson couple started watching from their window whenever Patty showed up, taking their own photos. Other neighbors began sharing stories. Unauthorized fee increases, selective enforcement of landscaping rules, mysterious violations that only seemed to target people Patty didn't like. The tension in the neighborhood was thick as summer heat radiating from the asphalt. You could feel it when you stepped outside, this sense that everyone was watching, waiting to see how this power struggle would play out. My emotional journey during this period was fascinating to observe, even from inside it. The initial anger I felt when finding her car in my driveway transformed into something more strategic. I realized this wasn't just about parking, it was about power, control, and probably some deeper prejudices I didn't want to think about too hard. But I'm an engineer, and engineers solve problems systematically. I spent my evenings in my garage workshop, sketching automated gate solutions and researching local ordinances. I dove deep into HOA bylaws and discovered an interesting clause about member parking privileges that seemed to contradict everything Patty was doing. The mini twist came when I found local ordinances about driveway access rights. Turns out the city had very specific rules about what constituted harassment through parking violations. Patty might have thought she was untouchable as HOA president, but she'd picked a fight with someone who knew how to research municipal codes. As I sat in my garage that Friday night, surrounded by legal printouts and gate design sketches, I made a decision. If Patty wanted to play games with my property rights, I was going to show her what happens when you mess with someone who builds solutions for a living. Monday morning brought a new level of audacity that honestly impressed me with its sheer boldness. I came home from work to find Patty's Lexus parked so close to my garage door that it physically couldn't open. The metallic grinding of the garage door motor straining against insufficient clearance was like nails on a chalkboard. She was nowhere to be found, her car locked tight, and I was completely blocked from accessing my own garage. A small crowd of neighborhood kids had gathered to watch me circle my own property like some kind of refugee, unable to get into my own home. I called the non-emergency police line, hoping for help. The officer was sympathetic but explained the limitations. "It's a civil matter, sir. Unless she's blocking a fire hydrant or violating a posted sign, there's not much we can do immediately." The towing company required 24-hour notice, and get this, HOA board approval to remove a vehicle from private property in our development. Patty had engineered a perfect trap using her own authority. So there I was, forced to park on the street and carry my groceries 100 yards, while neighbors watched this humiliating violation of my basic property rights. The frustration was eating me alive, but it also triggered my research instincts. That evening I discovered something interesting about our HOA president. Patty's real estate license requires adherence to ethical conduct standards, and I found online reviews of her business that revealed a pattern of boundary violations with clients. Comments like, "showed up unannounced," "ignored our requests," and "made us uncomfortable in our own home." Here's a knowledge nugget that became crucial later. Real estate agents can lose their licenses for harassment complaints filed with the state licensing board. The takeaway? Professional behavior requirements don't disappear just because someone holds a volunteer position. But I needed a more immediate solution to the parking problem. That's when I noticed my driveway sprinkler system and had what I can only describe as an engineering epiphany. I adjusted the sprinkler head closest to where Patty typically parked, angling it to spray precisely in that spot. Then I reset the timer for 6 a.m., daily activation, right when she usually arrived for her morning harassment ritual. I covered the adjustment with an innocent landscaping project, planting some decorative stones around the area. The sound of pressurized water hitting hot metal and concrete at dawn became my new favorite alarm clock. It took exactly 3 days for Patty to arrive early enough to get caught in my little irrigation modification. I was sipping coffee in my kitchen when I heard her car door slam, followed immediately by a shriek that probably woke half the neighborhood. She stormed to my front door, dripping wet and furious. "This is deliberate," she screamed, water still dripping from her tennis outfit. "I'm filing a complaint with the city." I opened the door with my most innocent expression. "Oh no, did you get caught in the sprinklers? I've been having trouble with that system. It keeps activating at weird times. You should probably park somewhere else until I get it fixed." The look on her face was priceless, pure rage mixed with the dawning realization that she couldn't prove intentional targeting. Her counter-move was predictably petty and escalatory. She started parking sideways, blocking my entire driveway width. If she couldn't park in her usual spot without getting soaked, she'd make sure I couldn't use my driveway at all. This is when I decided to upgrade my documentation game. I installed a motion-activated security camera with night vision, positioned to capture the entire driveway area. The footage it collected over the next week was absolutely fascinating. I captured Patty keying what she thought was my car. It was actually my neighbor's Honda that happened to be parked nearby. I recorded her 2 a.m. property walks, checking for violations with a flashlight. Most disturbing was the footage of her going through my trash cans, looking for evidence she could use against me. Mrs. Rodriguez shared her own security footage, which showed Patty measuring the height of my fence with a tape measure and photographing my garden decorations from multiple angles. The woman was conducting surveillance operations that would make a private investigator proud. But here's where the community support really started building. The Henderson couple finally spoke up after witnessing Patty's sideways parking strategy. "She ticketed us for having the identical flag you have," they confided. "Same violation notice. Same threat of fines." 3 more neighbors came forward with their own selective enforcement stories. We started an informal alliance with a group text message chain and shared cloud storage for security footage. Coffee shop meetings filled with whispered conversations and manila folders became our new normal. Meanwhile, I'd begun designing my ultimate solution, an automated boom gate system. I researched the permits required for driveway modifications and discovered a beautiful loophole. Private property modifications require no HOA approval as long as they meet city building codes. The psychological warfare was working. By forcing Patty to escalate her behavior, I was successfully shifting this from a personal conflict to a community-wide problem. Every neighbor who got irritated by her spreading harassment became a potential ally in my campaign. 2 weeks later, Patty pulled her most desperate move yet, I was in my garage assembling a new sprinkler timer when I heard police sirens. Through my window, I watched a patrol car pull up to my house, and out stepped Officer Martinez, looking confused and slightly annoyed. Patty emerged from her house like she'd been waiting for her cue, practically jogging over in her tennis whites. "Officer, thank goodness you're here. This man has been threatening me with construction equipment." The radio static and leather creaking as Officer Martinez shifted uncomfortably told me everything I needed to know about how seriously he was taking this complaint. He looked at me holding a plastic sprinkler timer, then at Patty gesturing dramatically toward my garage. "Ma'am, what exactly is the nature of the threat?" he asked. I calmly handed him my documentation folder, photos, timestamps, copies of relevant HOA bylaws, and printouts of Arizona trespassing laws. "Officer, I've been documenting systematic harassment and property violations for over a month. This woman has been trespassing on my driveway daily, despite repeated requests to stop." As Officer Martinez flipped through my evidence, I could see Patty's confidence evaporating. Her story about construction equipment threats seemed pretty flimsy when confronted with spreadsheets and legal documentation. "Sir," the officer said privately after reviewing everything, "you might want to consider filing for a restraining order. This level of obsessive behavior toward a neighbor could escalate further." Here's another knowledge nugget that proved crucial. Police reports create an official record even when no charges are filed, establishing a documented pattern of harassment that courts love to see later. The takeaway? Always get incidents on the official record, even minor ones. 3 nights later, I discovered just how desperate Patty had become. My security camera caught her at 3 a.m. with a tube of construction adhesive, jamming my driveway gate latch so I couldn't open it the next morning. The footage was clear as day, her face illuminated by my motion-activated lights as she sabotaged my property. But she wasn't done. The same camera revealed her attacking my sprinkler head with a hammer, destroying the mechanism I'd spent an hour adjusting. The repair cost me $200, 0 cents, but the evidence was priceless. My counterpunch was swift and decisive. I ordered a professional boom gate system, $3,200, 0 cents of solar-powered smartphone-controlled justice. The specs were beautiful: 12-foot span, automatic license plate recognition, and a smartphone app that would log every access attempt. Installation was scheduled for the following weekend. I filed the permits with the city, perfectly legal for private property improvements, and suddenly had a paper trail proving my modifications were legitimate and authorized. Patty's response was to call an emergency HOA board meeting, claiming my aggressive modifications were destroying neighborhood harmony. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife, considering she'd been destroying neighborhood harmony for months with her parking violations. Only 2 of the 5 board members even showed up. Mrs. Rodriguez attended as my supporter, along with the Henderson couple and 2 other neighbors who'd grown tired of Patty's selective enforcement campaigns. The meeting was held in Patty's living room, a power play that backfired spectacularly. She'd prepared a slideshow about my violations and threatening behavior, but I counter-presented with my documentation of 47 instances of trespassing and $800, 0 cents in property damage. The air conditioning hummed over tense silence as the evidence accumulated. Board member Janet Walsh, who'd been silent for months, finally spoke up. "Patty, this is clearly harassment. We can't support this behavior." That's when my research into HOA bylaws paid off in a big way. Section 12.3 stated that board members are held to a higher standard of conduct and may be removed for violations of community covenants. I'd found precedent cases where board presidents were removed for exactly this type of property harassment. Here's the legal nugget that changed everything. HOA board members can be personally liable for harassment when they use their official position to target individual homeowners. The takeaway? Board authority doesn't protect you from civil rights violations. I didn't even have to threaten anything. I simply read the bylaw aloud and mentioned that state HOA regulatory boards take these complaints very seriously. The room went dead quiet. Dick's neighbors formally requested Patty's removal from the board the next day. The Henderson couple documented her parking in their driveway as evidence of an expanding pattern. Mrs. Rodriguez revealed a decade of selective enforcement targeting anyone who crossed Patty. We created a shared Google document cataloging violations and incidents. The evidence was overwhelming. This wasn't about me anymore. This was about systematic abuse of authority that had been going on for years. My boom gate was scheduled for delivery Saturday morning. I'd arranged for 2 engineer friends to help with installation, ensuring I'd have professional witnesses to the process. The system included backup power, manual override for emergencies, and enough technological sophistication to make any harassment attempt automatically documented. Patty started driving by my house multiple times daily, interrogating neighbors about my construction project. She was spiraling and everyone could see it. Her desperation was palpable, and I knew the final confrontation was coming soon. But before that confrontation came, I stumbled onto something that changed everything. I was researching property tax assessments for my boom gate permit application when I noticed something odd about Patty's corner lot records. According to the county assessor's database, Patty had been paying reduced property taxes for the past 5 years. Her official property boundaries showed additional square footage that seemed to include part of my driveway. I pulled the original development plans and compared them to current tax records. My blood ran cold. Patty had been fraudulently claiming my driveway as part of her property for tax purposes, saving approximately $1,400.00 annually. The woman wasn't just harassing me, she was literally stealing from the county by falsifying property boundaries. The documentation trail was damning. City records showed her driveway configuration didn't match what she'd reported to tax assessors. She'd been paying taxes on 0.3 acres when her actual lot was 0.26 acres, with the difference coming from my property. Mrs. Rodriguez's revelation was the final piece of the puzzle. When I showed her the tax records, she disappeared into her basement and returned with a 3-ring binder that looked like evidence from a criminal investigation. "I've been documenting her behavior for years, mija," she said, the musty smell of stored papers filling her kitchen. "She did this exact same thing to your predecessor." The binder contained photos, dates, witness statements, and property surveys spanning 5 years. The previous homeowner, a single mother named Jennifer, had experienced identical harassment before selling at a loss after 18 months of HOA persecution. But here's the kicker. Patty's real estate agency had represented the buyer when Jennifer sold. She'd been systematically harassing homeowners to force quick sales, then profiting from both sides of the transaction. I researched real estate records and found the pattern was undeniable. 5 families had moved out in the past 3 years after HOA conflicts with Patty. All were minorities, single parents, or recent divorces. 3 of those sales were handled by Patty's agency, generating approximately $180,000.00 in total commissions. The weight of those documentation folders in Mrs. Rodriguez's basement represented years of systematic abuse. This wasn't simple neighbor harassment. This was a coordinated scheme combining tax fraud, housing discrimination, and real estate manipulation. And here's the legal knowledge that made my head spin. Property tax fraud is a felony in most states, carrying potential fines of $50,000.00 plus penalties and interest. When combined with using HOA authority to discriminate and generate business, you're looking at Federal Fair Housing Act violations. The power dynamic had completely shifted. I was no longer a defensive victim responding to petty harassment. I was sitting on evidence of multiple felonies and civil rights violations that could destroy Patty's real estate career and potentially land her in prison. Her aggressive tactics suddenly made perfect sense. She wasn't just protecting her convenience or asserting dominance. She was protecting a lucrative criminal enterprise that depended on maintaining fear and control over targeted homeowners. The community's support now included families with legal standing for discrimination claims. Mrs. Rodriguez had been documenting not just Patty's behavior, but also the demographic patterns of her targets. The evidence suggested coordinated harassment designed to force out specific types of residents. My engineering background was perfect for analyzing and presenting this systematic behavior. I could create timelines, cross-section data, and document patterns that would be impossible for Patty to explain away as coincidence. But the most shocking revelation was the scope of the tax fraud. Patty had been claiming portions of 3 different neighbors' properties, not just mine. The total fraudulent square footage was nearly 1,200 square feet of property she didn't own but had been paying reduced taxes on for years. As I sat in my garage that evening, surrounded by evidence of systematic fraud and discrimination, I realized this case was bigger than my driveway. This was about protecting an entire community from a predator who'd been using her authority to steal, discriminate, and profit from other people's misery. The Boomgate installation was no longer just about stopping parking violations. It was about documenting evidence for what would become the most comprehensive HOA abuse case our county had ever seen. My garage transformed overnight from a workshop into something that looked like a FBI investigation headquarters. I mounted a wall-sized timeline showing incidents, property records, and HOA meeting minutes. Mrs. Rodriguez became my primary intelligence source, while the Henderson couple provided technical support and crucial witness testimony. The legal strategy took shape when I contacted Maria Santos, a civil rights attorney who specialized in housing discrimination. After reviewing my evidence folders, she leaned back in her chair and whistled softly. "Mike, this is a textbook Fair Housing Act violation with bonus tax fraud. I haven't seen a case this clear-cut in 15 years. We developed a three-pronged approach: criminal complaint to the county prosecutor, federal civil rights lawsuit, and professional misconduct complaint to the state real estate licensing board. Here's the knowledge nugget that made my day. Fair housing violations carry automatic attorney fees for victims, meaning Patty would pay my legal costs even if we settled. The Boomgate system arrived Tuesday morning in a crate that looked like it could contain missile parts, commercial-grade equipment designed for parking garages, complete with vehicle detection sensors and smartphone integration. My two engineer colleagues, Dave and Rick, volunteered to help with installation, partly because they wanted to see justice served, but mostly because they were fascinated by the technical specs. Community coalition building accelerated as 7 neighbors signed formal complaints against Patty. Mrs. Rodriguez organized coffee meetings that were really strategy sessions with shared manila folders and whispered conversations. The scope of harassment was staggering. It extended far beyond parking violations to include noise complaints for children playing, architectural violations for holiday decorations, and landscaping restrictions that seemed designed to bankrupt homeowners. I created a digital database, cross-referencing photos, videos, timestamps, and witness statements with property records and HOA meeting minutes. The financial analysis revealed Patty's tax fraud totaled over $7,000, 0 cents in unpaid taxes, while real estate transaction analysis showed $180,000, 0 cents in commissions from forced sales of targeted families. Our surveillance network was impressive enough to make the NSA jealous. Coordinated security camera coverage from multiple neighbors fed into shared cloud storage, while our group text message chain provided real-time incident reporting. My phone buzzed constantly with new evidence, constant documentation of a harassment campaign that had been flying under the radar for years. The professional complaint preparation was particularly satisfying. Real estate license boards take ethics violations seriously, and I had evidence of discrimination, harassment, fraud, and using professional position for personal gain. The timeline demonstrated a clear pattern of violating every ethical standard in the real estate profession. The media strategy was crucial. I identified a consumer protection reporter at Channel 12 who'd covered HOA abuse stories before. The evidence package I prepared was compelling enough for investigative journalism. But I wanted to let Patty's actions speak for themselves rather than appearing vindictive. Installation day logistics required military precision. Saturday morning installation was scheduled with permits displayed prominently for legal compliance. Neighbors were invited to observe as community witnesses, and I planned to video document the entire process for evidence purposes. I practiced calm responses to expected confrontation scenarios with Dave and Rick. Role-playing helped me focus on facts, documentation, and legal compliance rather than getting drawn into emotional arguments. My goal was maintaining the high ground regardless of how Patty reacted. The technical specifications were beautiful in their simplicity. The Boomgate spanned 12 feet with a 6-second raise/lower cycle, powered by solar panels with battery backup. Smartphone app control included access logging, and pressure sensors prevented vehicle damage during operation. Contingency planning covered every scenario I could imagine. Police contact information was programmed into my phone, my attorney was on standby for emergency consultation, and I had arranged alternative parking for Emma's weekend visits. Documentation plans were ready for any sabotage attempts. The final preparation involved reviewing all evidence one more time, confirming legal compliance of every planned action, and coordinating with neighbors for installation day support. The garage air was thick with anticipation. and machine oil, the smell of justice being carefully engineered. But the most important preparation was psychological. I'd spent months being reactive, responding to Patty's harassment with increasingly sophisticated defenses. Now, I was taking the offensive, implementing a solution that would permanently solve the parking problem while gathering evidence for the larger legal case. The boom gate represented more than just access control. It was a symbol of property rights, engineering ingenuity, and refusal to be bullied by petty authority. Every neighbor who'd been harassed, every family who'd been forced to move, every homeowner who'd been targeted for selective enforcement was counting on this moment. Saturday morning couldn't come fast enough. The weight of community expectations mixed with my own desire for justice created an atmosphere of barely contained excitement. Mrs. Rodriguez had promised to bring homemade cookies for the installation crew. The Henderson couple was planning to document everything on video. Even my daughter Emma was excited to see her dad finally fighting back against the woman who'd made our lives miserable for months. "Dad," she'd said, "you're going to show that lady what happens when you mess with an engineer." Indeed I was. Friday night before installation, my security cameras caught something that made my blood boil. At 2:47 a.m. there was Patty creeping across my driveway with bolt cutters, attempting to damage the boom gate components I'd stored under a tarp. The motion-activated lighting illuminated her face perfectly as she struggled with the heavy-duty construction materials. She failed, of course. I'd secured everything with hardened steel cables, but fled when Mrs. Rodriguez's ancient chihuahua started barking loud enough to wake the dead. The footage was crystal clear evidence of attempted sabotage and destruction of property. Saturday morning brought installation day drama that exceeded even my expectations. At 8 a.m. sharp, Dave and Rick arrived with their tools to find Patty's Lexus blocking my driveway access. She emerged from her house like she'd been waiting for her cue, wearing what looked like her most authoritative outfit. "I have the right to inspect this construction for HOA compliance," she announced, positioning herself between my crew and the installation site. "This violates community standards and I'm shutting it down." I called the police immediately. Officer Martinez arrived within 10 minutes, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Ma'am, you need to move your vehicle. This is private property and the gentleman has proper permits." Patty's face went through that fascinating color progression again as the officer ordered her to move her car and warned her about further interference. The sweet sound of justice being served at 8:30 in the morning. But she wasn't done. An hour later, she returned with a city inspector, apparently her tennis club buddy who owed her a favor. This backfired spectacularly when the inspector found all permits in order and construction legally compliant. When Patty demanded property line measurements, the surveyor she'd called confirmed the boom gate was entirely on my property. By 2 p.m., installation was complete. The first test was absolutely satisfying. The gate functioned perfectly, with a mechanical hum that sounded like victory. I demonstrated the smartphone app for the assembled neighbors, showing them how every access attempt would be automatically logged with timestamp and photo evidence. Patty's immediate retaliation was predictably desperate. At 3 p.m., she attempted to park in my driveway like nothing had changed. The boom gate's vehicle sensors triggered automatic closure, preventing access while her car sat there like a confused metal beast. She pounded on my door, demanding immediate removal of this illegal structure. I calmly explained through the door intercom system that private property rights supersede HOA preferences, while video cameras documented her increasingly erratic behavior. Her threats of lawsuits and city violations rang hollow when confronted with proper permits and legal compliance. The escalation of her desperation was fascinating to watch. She called city compliance, fire department, and planning commission, claiming the gate created public safety hazards. Each inspection confirmed the system was legal, properly installed, and included appropriate emergency access features. Here's a knowledge nugget that saved me headaches. Emergency access requirements don't apply to private driveways, only public roads and commercial properties. The takeaway? Know your local codes before critics start making false claims about safety violation. Community reaction was overwhelmingly positive. Neighbors gathered to witness the gate operation, applauding when it successfully blocked unauthorized access. The Henderson couple requested installation referrals for their own driveway. Mrs. Rodriguez brought homemade cookies to celebrate what she called justice finally being served. Patty's harassment campaign expanded beyond parking. She began honking her horn outside my house at 6 a.m. daily, left threatening notes on neighbors' cars, and called my workplace, claiming I'd violated construction codes. She filed nuisance complaints with 3 different city departments, each one dismissed after investigation. The documentation trap was working perfectly. Every interaction was automatically logged by the gate system, with smartphone app data recording all access attempts and timestamps. Video integration captured Patty's increasingly erratic behavior, creating legal evidence that accumulated automatically. My strategic response was beautifully simple: maintain calm documentation, while letting Patty destroy her own credibility through escalating desperation. I shared evidence with my attorney for the harassment case and coordinated with neighbors to document her expanding pattern of retaliation. The breaking point setup was obvious to everyone watching. Patty's behavior became increasingly public and erratic as neighbors began avoiding her and refusing to support her complaints. HOA board members started distancing themselves from her actions, realizing the liability implications of supporting systematic harassment. For one glorious week, the boom gate operated flawlessly with 0 unauthorized parking incidents. My stress levels dropped dramatically. Emma could visit without parking drama, and I could access my own garage without obstacle courses. The technical success was matched by psychological victory. Patty's power and control had been completely neutralized by superior engineering. But I knew this was just the calm before the storm. Desperate people do desperate things, and Patty was about to prove just how far she'd go to maintain her reign of neighborhood terror. The final confrontation was building like a summer thunderstorm in the desert. You could feel the electricity in the air, waiting for lightning to strike. The lightning struck on a Tuesday morning when Patty showed up at my door with an envelope containing $2,000, 0 cents in cash. I recorded the entire conversation on my smartphone app as she stood there sweating in the desert heat, trying to buy her way out of the mess she'd created. "Look, Mike, let's resolve this dispute privately," she said, her voice shaking as she held out the envelope. "This gate embarrasses the entire neighborhood. People are talking." I stared at that cash, realizing I was witnessing the final act of a woman who'd built her power on intimidation and was now reduced to attempted bribery. "Patty, are you offering me money to remove legal improvements from my own property?" "It's not a bribe," she stammered. "It's compensation for your trouble." The irony was beautiful. Here was someone who'd been stealing from the county through tax fraud, trying to solve her problems by throwing cash around. I politely declined her offer and suggested she consult an attorney about her escalating legal problems. That bribery attempt triggered my deep dive into HOA finances, and what I found made the property tax fraud look like pocket change. Over 2 years, there were $23,000, 0 cents, in unexplained expenses, labeled as landscape maintenance and community improvements that nobody could account for. I think the paper trail led straight to Patty's husband's landscaping company, which had received every single contract without competitive bidding. Here's a knowledge nugget that floored me. HOA board self-dealing is illegal in most states and can result in personal liability for all fraudulent payments. The takeaway: board members can't use their position to funnel money to family businesses. Patty's response to my rejection was a full-scale smear campaign that would have impressed a political operative. She created fake social media accounts to attack my character, posting misleading photos of my property with inflammatory captions like "neighborhood eyesore" and "dangerous modifications." The rumors she spread were vicious and personal. Lies about my divorce, my finances, even my relationship with my daughter. She contacted my engineering firm with false claims about unprofessional conduct and workplace violations. But I'd learned to trace digital footprints, and my counterintelligence investigation revealed the fake accounts originated from devices registered to Patty's home network. My attorney confirmed that cyber-stalking and defamation claims were viable, adding yet another layer to our growing legal case. Her desperation reached new heights when she attempted to rally the city council against what she called the dangerous precedent of allowing boom gates in residential areas. She claimed my installation would destroy neighborhood character and organized a petition with what turned out to be forged signatures. The city council meeting was a disaster for Patty. Council members had already reviewed my permits, inspected the installation, and found everything legally compliant. Her petition fell apart when handwriting analysis revealed multiple signatures in identical penmanship. That's when things got physical. Thursday evening, I was working in my garage when I heard my security system alarm. Through the camera feed, I watched Patty approach my boom gate with a baseball bat, screaming threats about personally removing this eyesore. The neighbors called the police as she stood there in full view of multiple cameras, threatening to destroy my property with a weapon. The metallic click of handcuffs 20 minutes later was the sweetest sound I'd heard in months. The arrest report detailed Patty's escalating harassment pattern, and I finally got the restraining order I should have filed weeks earlier. The HOA board called an emergency meeting to discuss her immediate removal, realizing the liability nightmare of keeping an arrested board president. Local news picked up the story. HOA president arrested for harassment. Channel 12's consumer protection reporter interviewed me and several neighbors, framing it as homeowner fights back against HOA abuse. The video footage of my boomgate operation went viral on social media, with thousands of shares and comments supporting my engineering solution. National HOA reform advocates contacted me for testimony about systematic abuse patterns. My case was being cited as evidence for legislative reform, which felt surreal but incredibly satisfying. The community transformation was remarkable. 6 homeowners requested boomgate installation referrals, tired of dealing with parking violations and property harassment. We formed a neighborhood watch program focused on monitoring HOA compliance and preventing future abuse. Property values actually increased due to reduced harassment concerns and improved community governance. The petition to permanently remove Patty from the board gained signatures from 34 of 47 households. Financial reckoning came when we hired a forensic accountant to review all HOA finances. The additional fraud discoveries were staggering. Phantom maintenance expenses, inflated vendor payments, and mysterious emergency repairs that never happened. Total fraud was estimated at over $35,000, 0 cents across 3 years. Legal momentum was building like an avalanche. Civil rights lawsuit filed with extensive evidence, real estate license board scheduling disciplinary hearings, criminal charges pending for fraud and harassment. My attorney was confident of significant monetary damages and professional consequences. But the real victory was technical vindication. My boomgate operated perfectly through all the drama, with 0 mechanical failures despite attempted sabotage. The smartphone app provided crucial evidence for legal proceedings, and the engineering solution proved both practical and evidentiary success. Patty's complete isolation was almost sad to watch. Her husband filed for divorce, citing legal exposure. Real estate clients canceled contracts due to negative publicity, and even her tennis club quietly terminated her membership. The stage was set for our final public confrontation. The Phoenix Community Center had never seen anything like it. Over 200 residents packed the main hall for what was supposed to be a routine town hall meeting about HOA governance concerns. Local TV news cameras positioned themselves for full coverage, while city council members and HOA regulatory officials sat at the front table looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. The air conditioning struggled against the crowd heat and nervous energy that filled the room like electricity before a thunderstorm. You could smell the tension mixed with coffee and the faint desert dust that somehow gets into every Phoenix building. Patty arrived with a new attorney despite the restraining order requiring her to maintain distance from me. She looked haggard, her usual tennis outfit replaced by a conservative suit that couldn't hide the desperation in her eyes. Her attempt to present herself as the victim of a malicious neighbor fell flat when she faced a room full of people she'd harassed over the years. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice shaking, "we're here because one resident has decided that community standards don't apply to him. This boomgate violates everything our neighborhood represents." The hostile murmur from the crowd told me everything I needed to know about how this was going to go. When my turn came, I approached the podium with my laptop and a folder thick enough to choke a horse. My presentation was calm, methodical, and devastating. The digital slideshow included photos, videos, financial documents, and a timeline that painted a picture of systematic harassment spanning years. "Here's what really happened," I said, clicking to the first slide showing Patty's car in my driveway. "Patricia Moorcock has been trespassing on my property 127 times over 6 months. She's committed tax fraud by claiming my driveway as part of her property, and she's used her HOA position to discriminate against families she wanted to force out of the neighborhood." The evidence avalanche was beautiful to watch. property tax fraud documentation presented to city officials, real estate license violations detailed with specific examples, Fair Housing Act violations explained with legal precedents. When I got to the financial fraud, $35,000 in missing HOA funds. The room erupted in angry murmurs. Mrs. Rodriguez took the microphone next, presenting her 3-year documentation of harassment with the dignity of someone who'd been waiting decades for justice. "This woman has terrorized our neighborhood long enough," she said, her voice carrying the weight of years of systematic abuse. The Henderson couple described intimidation and selective enforcement. 5 other families detailed systematic discrimination that forced them to consider moving. The pattern of abuse spanning a decade became undeniable as each story built on the last. That's when Channel 12's consumer protection reporter stepped forward with the question that broke everything open. "Ms. Moorcock, how do you respond to allegations that you've been filing false property tax claims and using your HOA position to generate real estate commissions?" Patty's response was spectacular in its complete meltdown. She stood up, pointed at the camera, and screamed, "This is harassment. You people are destroying an innocent woman." Then she stormed toward the exit, shoving the camera operator hard enough to send him stumbling. The dramatic footage of an HOA president physically attacking media while fleeing public accountability was going to lead the 11 o'clock news. I remained calm throughout her tantrum, answering every question professionally and sticking to documented facts. The contrast between her hysteria and my measured responses was stark enough to make the point, without me saying a word. Official responses came swift and decisive. The city attorney confirmed a criminal investigation was being launched. The HOA Regulatory Board announced a formal compliance review. The Real Estate License Board scheduled an immediate disciplinary hearing. The county assessor began a property tax fraud investigation. But the mic drop moment came when I revealed my Boomgate's final secret. The system has recorded 127 unauthorized access attempts with full video documentation, I said, pulling up the smartphone app data. Every single interaction is logged with timestamps, photos, and GPS coordinates, including the audio recording of Ms. Moorcock attempting to bribe me with $2,000, 0 cents cash. The crowd's collective gasp was audible as the corruption extent became clear. Camera flashes created strobing light during my testimony, while nervous paper rustling came from Patty's attorney's table as he reviewed his hopeless case. Legal vindication followed immediately. My attorney announced the successful civil rights lawsuit filing seeking $250,000, 0 cents, plus attorney fees, with punitive damages for willful discrimination. This was becoming a precedent case for HOA abuse victims nationwide. The community transformation was instant and dramatic. The HOA board unanimously voted to implement transparency rules, financial oversight committees, and anti-discrimination policies with real enforcement mechanisms. By acclamation, not even a formal vote, they elected me to the board. Media coverage exploded beyond our wildest expectations. The story led local news as "Engineers Boom, Gate Stops HOA Abuse," while social media turned my Boomgate into a symbol of homeowner empowerment against petty tyrants. When I demonstrated the gate operation for news cameras, explaining technical specifications and legal compliance, the crowd erupted in spontaneous applause. Children cheered as the Boomgate operated on command, the satisfied mechanical hum representing victory over months of systematic harassment. Mrs. Rodriguez presented me with a community service award as cameras rolled and neighbors lined up to thank me. The moment felt surreal. 6 months ago, I was a recently divorced engineer just trying to park in my own driveway. Now I was accidentally leading a homeowner rights revolution. 6 months later, the transformation is nothing short of miraculous. Patty's house sold within a week of the town hall meeting. Apparently, fleeing Phoenix was easier than facing the consequences of years of systematic harassment. My property value increased 15% due to improved neighborhood stability. And that Boomgate has become something of a tourist attraction for engineers and HOA reform advocates. The legal resolution exceeded even my attorney's expectations. The civil rights lawsuit settled for $180,000, 0 cents plus attorney fees, while criminal charges resulted in probation and a restitution order that'll keep Patty paying for her crimes for years. Her real estate license was permanently revoked, ending a career built on discrimination and fraud. The HOA financial audit recovered $28,000 in fraudulent expenses, money that went directly back to homeowners as fee reductions. Our new board implemented resident-friendly policies, monthly transparency meetings, and financial oversight that actually works. Property values across the entire development rose 8% due to improved governance and community reputation. The personal healing was just as important as the legal victory. Emma proudly tells her friends about her dad's engineering triumph, and our relationship grew stronger through this whole ordeal. My confidence, shattered by a difficult divorce, was rebuilt through proving I could fight back against injustice and win. The Boomgate legacy grew beyond anything I'd imagined. Popular Mechanics featured it as a DIY home security solution, and I've shared the design plans freely with harassment victims across the country. 3 manufacturers contacted me about commercial licensing, though I'm more interested in helping people than making money. But the real victory is the social good that came from this fight. I donated the entire lawsuit settlement to establish the Fair Housing Defense Fund, providing legal assistance to low-income homeowners facing HOA abuse. We've already helped 12 families fight back against systematic harassment, and the fund partners with civil rights organizations for broader reform efforts. The engineering scholarship program we established honors students studying housing issues and community planning. It's amazing how fighting for your own driveway can evolve into supporting the next generation of people who will design better communities. As for Patty's fate, she moved to a different state to escape local notoriety. The divorce was finalized with significant asset loss, and the restraining order remains in effect. She serves as a cautionary tale in HOA management training programs. Apparently, How Not to Be Patricia Moorcock is an actual course title now. My Boomgate operates flawlessly after 8 months, with 0 unauthorized parking incidents and 0 mechanical failures. The smartphone app has been upgraded with community features that help neighbors coordinate security and document any future problems. The system paid for itself through prevented property damage and legal evidence value. The neighborhood transformation continues to amaze me. Crime dropped 40% due to improved community vigilance and cooperation. New residents are attracted by our reputation for fairness and effective governance. Our annual community festival celebrates unity instead of division, with proceeds supporting local housing advocacy. Media follow-up stories track our progress, and my case gets referenced in state legislative hearings about HOA reform. The National HOA Reform Bill, currently in Congress, actually cites our situation as evidence for why systematic oversight is needed. My personal life has flourished in ways I never expected. I'm dating Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter, Carmen, a divorced teacher who appreciates men who stand up to bullies. My relationship with Emma is stronger than ever, and I've built friendships throughout the community that extend far beyond property disputes. The broader impact continues, expanding. 12 similar harassment cases have cited our precedent in their legal filings. HOA management companies now provide anti-discrimination training specifically because of cases like ours. Property management software includes harassment documentation features inspired by our evidence collection methods. Every morning, I enjoy my coffee in peaceful silence, listening to desert sunrise sounds instead of arguments about parking. My garage door opens without obstruction for the 247th consecutive day. The satisfied click of my smartphone app showing 0 unauthorized access attempts never gets old. But the best part is what we've built together as a community. We proved that ordinary people can fight back against petty tyrants and win, that engineering problems have engineering solutions, and that standing up for your rights can inspire others to do the same. So here's my challenge to you. Drop a comment below with your own HOA nightmare story. Trust me, you're not alone in this fight. What would you have done differently in my situation? And hey, if this story inspired you to stand up to your own neighborhood bully, I want to hear about it. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about fighting back against petty tyrants. Next week, I'm sharing how my neighbor tried to steal my backyard using fraudulent surveys, and how I got revenge using nothing but geometry and property law. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well and having really good documentation.